Thank you so much for finding Channel Core. Now, without any ado, let's do Gladiator 2. Okay, as far as Ridley being so surprisingly hit or miss since, say, the first Gladiator movie, which finally cemented him as a full-blown A-list director because of how successful it was on virtually every level. A Good Year, I think, had such bad reviews I didn't even bother. The Counselor looked boring and tanked as well. Egypt, Gods and Monsters is the only one in the bunch that I say is genuinely unwatchable. The third act of Robin Hood is so bad it ruins the whole movie. Everyone hates the two Alien follow-ups but me, and I'm fully aware of problems like how stupid the pilots and scientists are, but I can still enjoy them for the most part. I also think I liked Hannibal more than almost everyone I know. Now, I remember liking both Matchstick Men and Body of Lies, but I recall almost nothing about those. It's just been forever since I've seen them. Napoleon is going to be boring for most people. I also think it's hard to follow as far as the time periods of his life. And worst of all, the theatrical version completely blows past his entire attempt to invade Russia, which to me is historically one of the most interesting aspects of his regimes, and it is actually supposed to be included in the director's cut, but that's not exactly inviting at 3 hours and 25 minutes, not when the first version was as boring as it was. House of Gucci is quite watchable, though not awesome, with one of the most impressive things being that at halfway through, I was wondering where Jared Leto was, and it turns out he was not only masking his voice, but like Colin Farrell as the Penguin, he's got so much makeup on that it's nearly impossible to recognize him, but you can at least do so through his eyes once you know it's him. The Last Duel, and especially the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven, are both very underrated. I really liked those. Bottom of the awesome list is Black Hawk Down, only because it's got bits of downtime, and it's not one I'm likely to rewatch all that often. All the Money in the World is for me right above that. It's one I never shut up about because it seems like no one's seen it, and two BFFs who finally got to it were more or less blown away by it. It's pretty much a riveting thriller the entire way through, and FYI, it's the movie Ridley recast Kevin Spacey in for getting canceled, and his replacement Christopher Plummer then won an Oscar for the role of J. Paul Getty. I'd put Gladiator right above that. The funny thing being, I remember me and the nerds just seeing it as a really fun popcorn movie, and were surprised that it started getting all the Oscar buzz that it did, but what can you do? It is awesome. Oh, and the other thing is, weirdly enough, it's got like a 67 Metascore, which is pretty low for a movie that, however much it swept the Oscars, it won a fair amount. Whereas this new one has a 62, so not much lower. But yeah, I don't think you generally see Oscar-winning movies with that low. Like, usually we're seeing something in the 70s and 80s Metascore, and I don't know if I'd have to look at the list to see if anything got a 90. It's pretty hard to get above a 90 on Metascore, but you know what gets a 90 is just like some documentary or some super indie movie. Maybe tons of critics didn't actually review it, so it's always sketchy when I'll see a high Metascore and go like, oh, what's that? And you're just like, all right, no one's going to want to see this. The two most awesome of Ridley Scott's movies, in my opinion, again since 2000, are American Gangster and The Martian. Gangster is, I'd say, medium-paced at worst, but it's insanely interesting and has a really great ending that makes the whole movie better once you get there. And I don't throw the word perfect around very often, but Martian really just hits every damn note you could hope for in a Hollywood movie, and in rare form is a movie that had a great trailer and turned out even better than expected. I loved both of those. However, I'm not going to leave this breakdown without going full nerd and declare that Alien and Blade Runner are his two best movies, partially for being so damn groundbreaking and influential, but also for being two of the greatest sci-fi movies ever made. I doubt the pacing of Blade Runner holds today for anyone under 50, but damn, the cinematography for both of those still looks absolutely amazing. Now, as far as Gladiator 2 goes, yes, Maximus, I am entertained. Apologies if my intro bored anyone, but I partially did that because this review is not going to be very extensive or long. First off, I don't know about you all, but my immediate reaction to seeing that this sequel was happening 25 years after the original left me with a bit of an eye roll, and the immediate instinct to not let myself get my hopes up that it would be watchable, let alone actually good. There's way more going on in this than I expected, especially with all the plot twists. palace intrigue, and character reveals, so I'm being super careful really to avoid spoiling anything that one might have already assumed or got from the trailer, which I still haven't watched. Okay, I just now stopped to watch the trailer, and I'm glad I avoided it because there's at least one major reveal that I'm avoiding, plus a handful of visuals that, if anything, spoil where some of the character twists end up. It's possible to have watched the trailer months ago, and because it's so fast-paced and whatnot, have forgotten everything, except for one line that reveals backstory that I'm glad I didn't know. Although in the movie that backstory lands about halfway through, so it's not played up like a huge lame twist in the end or anything. The broadest strokes here are that the hero guy's Providence is attacked by Romans, and him and a bunch of his peers get forced into becoming gladiators. And of course, the main guy is just a little more badass than most of them. Right away, you're thrust into the drama of who the rulers are and who's running all the daily routines in and around the Colosseum and the Emperor's regime. There's lots of politics and rivalries and oppression that's pissing people off, not to mention a blatant revenge element that's also spoiled in the trailer, with the kind of great thing being most of those plot mechanisms seem like they're going to be predictable, but by and large, they ultimately skew in directions I wasn't expecting, which is one of the coolest things you can hope for. There are a bunch of very cool uses of animals as far as the gladiators are concerned, and thankfully the trailer barely shows any of the main one, especially because it's surprisingly gnarly once you get there. This isn't loaded with action, but there's plenty of that stuff almost perfectly spread throughout this, with another great thing being care was taken to make it feel modern, and best of all, not stupid and lazy. You can see everything clearly, and none of it's drawn out to be visual overkill or excessively long or trying too hard to look cool in a way that embarrasses itself. Even better, there's something visually memorable in I believe every single battle and fight in some way, which is something that seems to be somewhat lost since the 80s and 90s, with the exception of the better directors whom the studios have actually let do their own thing without mouthing off. I don't really need to say more than that. I don't even remember if anyone swore with modern swear words, and I don't recall any nudity, but I could be wrong on both of those fronts because it's not something I notice without trying to. I was engaged the whole way through, and yes, the end builds to all kinds of confrontations and action, though the very, very, very end didn't blow me away with a huge fuck yeah moment or anything. I mean, don't get me wrong, it doesn't drop a final 5 or 10 minutes of straight up boring drama, and there is a just barely cliche build up to a final battle between two enemies that thankfully doesn't overstay its welcome and get stupid and silly. But it does peter out just a tiny bit on a wannabe powerful character moment that I can't say had a profound impact, and again, I'd have rather had something more in your face that left you straight up pumped than not. That's just me, thinking like first thought is Rocky movies in the 80s, like however it is you walk out of there more pumped than not. Again, this is minor. The ending was fine, and the good thing is I would say the journey through the whole movie to the ending is pretty great. I was never bored, pretty much totally engaged. This new actor guy I have seen in nothing is cool. He's likable and works as a badass. Reminds me a little of Gerard Butler, I guess, a little bit. But, well, you know what? He had a joke around element a little bit in 300 where, most of us really kind of first saw him. But yeah, this guy's cool enough. No idea if he'll, take off from here. Everyone's review is biased in some way. My opinions could totally change a week, a month, or years from now. So keep on loving what you love. Please give me a like before you forget. Subscribe if you feel like choosing wisely. And let me know below if I missed something or got something right. They say comments really help a channel, but please do it in the nicest way possible because I'm a very, very fragile man-child.